The room was a universe of polite lies, and Alara Vance was a ghost haunting its constellations. She wore a gown the color of a deep forest, an emerald silence in a sea of champagne gold and diamond chatter. The fabric was a soft armor, architecturally precise, its clean lines a stark contrast to the chaos blooming in her chest. For 10 years, she had been the unseen scaffolding holding up the magnificent edifice of her husband's career. Now, she was just a woman in a beautiful dress, trying not to be seen at all. Tonight was supposed to be Marcus's coronation. The Obsidian Gala was the apex of the architectural world, and the centerpiece of the evening was the Award for Urban Innovation, an award he was set to receive for the Vance Tower. Her tower. She could feel its phantom lines in the air around her, the sweep of its glass curtain wall, the cantilevered lobby that defied gravity, the precise, almost musical arrangement of its internal spaces. She had sketched it on napkins, drafted it in the blue light of sleepless nights, and built it in her mind 1,000 times before the first steel beam was ever sunk into the earth. Marcus had watched her, then taken the files, changed the name on the title block, and presented it as his own revelation. It was the last and most magnificent of his thefts. She had left him 3 days ago, not with a shout, but with the quiet click of a door. She had packed a single bag containing her sketchbooks, her laptop, and a set of clothes that did not feel like a costume for the role of Marcus Vance's wife. The silence in the car as she drove away was the kind that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. It was the sound of a foundation finally giving way, not to collapse, but to make room for something new. She was only here tonight because of a contract, a ghost of her former life, that obligated her to attend. Her lawyer had said it was better to fulfill the clause than to fight it. Just for a few hours, she'd advised. Be a phantom, in and out. So Alara stood in the shadows of a marble column, a glass of untouched water in her hand, and watched the man who had hollowed her out accept applause for the space she had created. He was on stage now, but he wasn't accepting the award. Not yet. Marcus had a flair for the dramatic, a need to make every room his personal stage. He had just been publicly and very messily dumped by Bianca, the model/actress he had been parading around as his muse. The irony was a bitter pill. Bianca, his muse for a project he hadn't designed, was leaving him on the night he was to be celebrated for it. He tapped the microphone, a feedback screech cutting through the polite hum. The room winced. "Thank you," he began, his voice thick with liquor and manufactured pathos. "Thank you, it's an honor." He swayed slightly. "They say great art comes from great passion. Or great pain." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Tonight, I seem to have an abundance of both." A nervous titter went through the crowd. This was not part of the program. Alara felt a familiar dread coil in her stomach. It was the dread of watching a fire you did not set, but would surely be blamed for. "Some of you may have heard," Marcus continued, his voice rising, "that my muse, my inspiration, has decided to move on." He was looking out at the crowd, but his eyes were unfocused, searching for a narrative that would paint him as the tragic hero. "She told the room she left me." He paused for effect. "And it's true. She did. Said I was too much, too intense, that my work consumed me." He was performing. He was always performing. This was the Marcus the world saw, the tortured artist, the brilliant mind so consumed by his vision that he couldn't maintain a simple human connection. Alara knew the truth. He was not consumed by work. He was consumed by a desperate, gnawing insecurity that he masked with cruelty and theft. He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her, of everyone, that had never been accurate. Alara decided she had fulfilled her obligation. The phantom could depart. She began a slow, careful retreat, moving along the wall, using the decorative flora as cover. She wanted to slip out the side entrance, to dissolve back into the city's anonymity. She was almost there, her hand hovering near the cool brass of the door handle. But you see, Marcus's voice boomed, now laced with a vicious new edge. That's the story of my life. People leave. They take what they need, and they go. His eyes finally found her. Across the vast, suddenly silent ballroom, his gaze locked onto hers. A predator spotting prey that had dared to break from the herd. Isn't that right, Alara? The entire room turned. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, curious, pitying, judgmental, all landed on her. She froze, her hand inches from the door. The emerald gown felt less like armor and more like a spotlight. There was no escape. He started down the steps of the stage, leaving the forgotten award on the podium. He moved with a drunkard's swagger, a dangerous unsteadiness. The crowd parted for him like water for a poisoned ship. "There she is," he announced, his voice a cruel mockery of a ringmaster. "The original, the one who taught me the lesson first." He was in front of her now, his breath sour with whiskey and rage. "Thought you could just disappear? After everything I gave you?" "Marcus, don't," she said, her voice a low tremor. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at his hand as it shot out and clamped around her arm. His fingers dug into her skin, a familiar, possessive pressure. "Gave you a life," he hissed, for her ears only, but his posture was for the room. "A name, a beautiful home. And you walk out, no explanation. You have an obligation, Ilara. To me." "Let go of my arm," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear. It was the clearest it had been in a decade. He laughed, a sharp, humorless bark. "Or what? You'll do what? You have nothing. You are nothing without me." It was then that the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. It was not a sound, but the absence of it. The nervous whispers ceased. The clinking of glasses stopped. The very air seemed to thicken, to grow heavy with a new and formidable gravity. A silence descended that was different from the awkward hush of Marcus's spectacle. This was the kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. It was a silence of deference, a silence of power. From a secluded alcove near the back of the room, a man rose. He was not a large man, but his presence seemed to warp the space around him. He moved with an unhurried, almost liquid grace, his charcoal suit a slash of midnight against the room's gilded light. He did not rush. He was not performing. Every eye in the room, save for Marcus's, was now fixed on him. The CEOs, the financiers, the city planners, they all knew him. He was Kalen Blackwood, the man whose company, Blackwood Holdings, was the silent primary investor in half the projects being celebrated tonight, including the Vance Tower. He was structural power, the kind of power that didn't need to speak loudly because it owned the room, the building, and the air within it. Marcus, blinded by his own rage, was the last to notice. He was still gripping Alara's arm, his face contorted. "You owe me," he spat again. "Let go of her arm, Marcus." The voice was low, calm, and carried the weight of absolute authority. It was steady as iron wrapped in silk. It cut through the tension with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Marcus froze. He turned slowly, his drunken belligerence deflating like a punctured lung. He saw Kalen Blackwood standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable, his eyes holding a cold, dispassionate stillness. Marcus's face, which had been flushed with rage, went pale. He had not updated the file on the room's power dynamics. He was working from a version that had never been accurate. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus stammered, his hand falling away from Ilara's arm as if it had been burned. We were just having a private discussion." Kalen's gaze did not flicker. He looked at the red marks on Ilara's skin, then back at Marcus's face. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "The discussion is over." He gave a nearly imperceptible nod to two men standing near the entrance. They were dressed in identical dark suits, their presence so unobtrusive as to be invisible until they began to move. They moved without wasted motion, their steps silent and sure. One placed a firm yet polite hand on Marcus's shoulder. What is this? Marcus yelped, trying to shrug the hand off. You can't do this. I'm the guest of honor. Your invitation has been revoked, Kalen said, his tone flat as if stating the time. To his men, he added a single word. Remove him. The second man took Marcus's other arm. There was no struggle. There was no undignified scuffle. There was only the swift, efficient removal of a problem. Marcus was walked out of the ballroom, his protests turning into confused, pathetic whimpers. The heavy doors swung shut behind him, muffling the final, ignominious sound. The room held its breath. Kalen Blackwood turned his attention to Ilara. For the first time, his expression softened, the icy stillness in his eyes thawing to something like concern. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time all night, she did not feel like a ghost. She felt seen. Are you all right, Miss Vance? He asked. His voice was still low, but it was for her alone now. She could only nod, her throat tight. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a profound, bone-deep tremor in its wake. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold her composure together. He seemed to understand. He did not touch her, did not offer a comforting hand that might feel like another cage. Instead, he created a space of quiet dignity around her. He turned slightly, positioning himself as a subtle barrier between her and the prying eyes of the room. My car is outside, he said. It was not a question or an offer. It was a statement of fact, a solution already in place. It will take you somewhere safe. He led her away from the main hall, not through the gaping doors where Marcus had been ejected, but through a discreet side panel she hadn't even noticed. It opened into a quiet, cool corridor of polished concrete and soft lighting. The cacophony of the gala faded behind them, replaced by the gentle hum of the building's life support. It felt like stepping from a storm into a quiet harbor. They walked in silence to a private elevator. Inside, the space was large and smelled faintly of leather and clean steel. He pressed the button for the penthouse level. I thought we were leaving, she said, her voice raspy. We are, he replied, his eyes on the ascending numbers. But first, I thought you might appreciate a moment of quiet, away from them. The elevator opened directly into a vast, private lounge. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, revealing a breathtaking panorama of the city glittering below. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and arranged with a sense of deliberate peace. A fire crackled in a long, low hearth. He led her to a pair of deep armchairs near the window and gestured for her to sit. He moved to a small, immaculate bar and poured a single glass of water, which he placed on the table beside her. He took nothing for himself. He simply sat in the opposite chair, leaving a respectful distance between them, and waited. She drank the water. It was cool and clean and felt like an anchor in the dizzying sea of the evening. She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. Kalen Blackwood was a man defined by stillness. In a world of frantic motion and loud pronouncements, he was a point of absolute calm. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his face held the kind of handsome severity that came from making billion-dollar decisions with unnerving regularity. But his eyes, which had been so cold in the ballroom, now held a quiet, watchful intelligence. Thank you, she said, the words feeling small and inadequate. He gave a slight nod. It was necessary. He did not say, You're welcome. He did not say, It was nothing. He stated the fact of the matter. The simplicity of it was disarming. Why did you, she began, sight unsure what to ask first. I am the primary investor in the Vance Tower project, he said, anticipating her question. Through a subsidiary of Blackwood Holdings, I make it a point to understand every facet of my investments. He paused, his gaze steady on hers, especially the most critical assets. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. Was he another man who saw her as an asset, a thing to be managed and controlled? As if reading her mind, he clarified. I'm not referring to Marcus. The air stilled. She waited. A few years ago, he began, his voice a low, narrative hum. I was reviewing a portfolio of potential development partners. Marcus Vance's name was on the list. His firm had a series of successful, if conventional, projects. But then I saw the preliminary submission for what would become the Vance Tower. It was different. He leaned forward slightly, his quiet intensity drawing her in. The design language was entirely new. It was audacious, elegant, and structurally brilliant. It didn't match anything else in his firm's history. It was like finding a perfect, intricate poem in the middle of a stack of appliance manuals. Alara's heart began to beat a little faster. I am a student of patterns, Kaylin continued. The sudden appearance of genius is not a pattern. It is an anomaly. So I dug deeper. I had my team pull the metadata from the initial design files, the early drafts, the conceptual sketches, the raw CAD blocks. They were all created under a different user profile. E. Vance. His eyes never left hers. I cross-referenced that with employee records. Ilara Vance, listed as a junior designer, his wife. The anomaly was explained. She felt the air leave her lungs in a slow, silent rush. He knew. He had known all along. All this time, while she had felt invisible, erased, there was one person in the world who had seen her. Not just seen her, but had sought her out in the digital ghosts of her own work. The relief was so profound, so disorienting, it felt like vertigo. You are the architect of the Vance Tower, he said. It was not a question. It was a coronation, quieter and more meaningful than the one Marcus had failed to receive downstairs. The cantilevered lobby, the way the western facade catches the light at sunset, the integration of the green spaces on the upper floors. That was not Marcus's work. It was yours. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back began to slip down her cheeks. She did not sob. They were quiet tears, a silent testament to years of unacknowledged labor, of stolen brilliance. He pushed a box of tissues across the table. He did not comment on her tears. He simply provided the means to address them and waited for her to be ready. That small act of grace, of allowing her dignity in a moment of emotional collapse, was more comforting than any platitude could ever be. After a long moment, she found her voice. He told me I was nothing without his name. His name is a liability, Kaylin stated, his voice turning cold again. Your talent is the asset. He has been leveraging it, and you, for a decade. That arrangement is now terminated. He stood up. My car is waiting in the sublevel garage. It will take you to a private residence at the Blackwood Grand. It is secure. No one will know you are there. No one can get to you. My head of security has already swept the apartment and will have a team stationed in the building. It was an offer of absolute protection, presented as a finished plan. She felt a flicker of her old fear. Another powerful man making decisions for her, placing her in a beautiful cage. She started. I can't be dependent on anyone else. Not again. He met her gaze, and his expression was not one of pity or possession, but of understanding. This is not about dependence, Miss Vance. This is about logistics. You require a secure location to recalibrate. I am providing one. You require legal counsel to extricate yourself from your contractual and marital obligations to Marcus. My legal team is the best in the country. They will be at your disposal tomorrow morning. Think of me not as a savior, but as a strategic partner. You have something I want. What? She asked, wary. Your mind, he said simply. I have a city to rebuild, but for now, you need to be safe. Will you accept the resources I am offering? He had framed it not as charity, but as a transaction. He was giving her safety and legal firepower. In return, he was expressing interest in her professional skill. It was an arrangement she could understand. It was a partnership, not a rescue. Yes, she said. The apartment was less a home and more a statement. It occupied the entire top floor of the Blackwood Grand, a sleek residential tower that was a monument to quiet, expensive taste. The walls were gallery white, the floors were polished dark wood, and the furniture was a curated collection of modern masterpieces that were both beautiful and comfortable. The main living area was a vast, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of the city she had helped to shape. Her tower, the Vance Tower, stood prominent in the skyline, a silent, glittering testament to the evening's strange turn of events. A woman in a sharp, dark suit, Kaylin's assistant, had met her upon arrival. Her name was Zara. She was efficient, her voice calm and professional. She showed Ilara the apartment's features, the state-of-the-art kitchen, the bedroom with a bed that looked like a cloud, the studio space with a drafting table and a full suite of design software already installed on a powerful computer. "Mr. Blackwood thought you might wish to have your tools," Zara had explained. On the table were sets of brand-new pencils, pens, and stacks of high-quality vellum. In the walk-in closet, a selection of clothes had been arranged. Simple, elegant pieces in muted colors, cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, tailored trousers. It was thoughtful, but it was also a reminder of her predicament. She was a refugee living on the curated kindness of a billionaire. The first few days were a blur of quiet adjustment. Ilara slept more than she had in years, the profound silence of the penthouse a balm on her frayed nerves. She explored the apartment, her bare feet silent on the cool wood floors. She stood for hours by the window, watching the city breathe below. It was safe here, the kind of absolute, impenetrable safety that only immense wealth could provide. But safety was not the same as freedom. On the third morning, Zara arrived with a breakfast tray and a schedule. "Good morning, Miss Vance. Mr. Blackwood has arranged a meeting with the legal team at 10 a.m. A car will be waiting downstairs at 9:45. He also had these delivered." She gestured to a set of beautiful leather portfolios. Ilara looked at the schedule, then at the clothes in the closet, then at the perfectly arranged tray of food. A switch flipped in her mind. It was the same quiet, decisive click of the door she had closed on her old life. She was grateful for the sanctuary, but she would not be a passive participant in her own liberation. "Thank you, Zara," she said, her voice polite but firm. "Please inform Mr. Blackwood's lawyers that I will be there at 11 a.m. I have my own transportation." She had used a ride-sharing app on a new burner phone she'd had delivered. "And please tell the kitchen I'm fine. I can handle my own breakfast." She looked at the portfolios. "I also won't be needing those. I have my own work." Zara's professional mask flickered with a hint of surprise, quickly replaced by respect. "Of course, Miss Vance. I will make the necessary adjustments." When Ilara walked into the lobby of the most powerful law firm in the city at precisely 11 a.m., she was not wearing the clothes Kaylin had provided. She was wearing a simple, architecturally precise black dress she had ordered online and had delivered to a pickup point a few blocks away. She carried her own laptop, and in her bag were the hard drives containing a decade of her work. Every sketch, every revision, every file meticulously backed up and dated. She was not a victim seeking aid. She was a client, prepared for battle. The lawyers, a team of 3 razor-sharp professionals who usually handled corporate mergers worth billions, were initially taken aback. They had been briefed to expect a fragile, traumatized woman. Instead, they found a calm, articulate professional who laid out the timeline of Marcus's intellectual property theft with cold, irrefutable clarity. She presented the data, explained the design evolution of each project, and pointed out her unique digital signature embedded in the foundational code of the files. By the end of the meeting, they were looking at her not with pity, but with a kind of awed respect. Meanwhile, Kaylin worked in the background. He did not interfere with her legal preparations. He respected the boundary she had drawn, but he moved his own pieces on the board, from his sterile, silent office high above the city. He issued a series of quiet commands. "Aria," he said to his head of acquisitions, a woman with eyes that could spot a rounding error from 100 paces. "I want a full financial workup of Vance Development and its parent holding company. I want to know every creditor, every loan, every line of credit. I want to know who owns their debt. And if it's not us, I want you to buy it." "Understood," Aria said, her fingers already flying across a keyboard. "By when?" "Yesterday," Kaylin replied without a trace of humor. He made another call, this time to a man whose name did not appear on any official company roster. Julian, Marcus Vance. I want to know about his private dealings, his investors, any side projects, any indiscretions. Be discreet. I want a complete psychological and financial profile. I want to know what he fears. He was not just offering Alara a shield. He was systematically dismantling the fortress from which Marcus had launched his attacks. He was not just pulling out the weeds, he was salting the earth. His relationship with Alara began to find its own quiet rhythm. He would return late in the evening to the penthouse, which was technically his home, though he rarely used it. He would find her in the studio, surrounded by sketches, the city lights her only illumination. She was not working on anything specific. She was just drawing, rediscovering the feel of a pencil in her hand, the joy of creating for no one but herself. He would not interrupt her. He would pour 2 glasses of wine, place one on the edge of her drafting table, and sit in a nearby armchair, reviewing reports on his tablet. They would exist in a comfortable silence, 2 focused minds sharing a space. Sometimes she would stop and ask him a question. Why are the public housing projects in the East Quadrant failing? He would put down his tablet and give her a real answer. Poor resource allocation, a lack of integrated green space, and a transportation strategy that isolates the community instead of connecting it. The city approved that design, she would counter. The city approved the cheapest bid, he would correct. It was a solution born of compromise, not vision. One evening, he unrolled a set of blueprints on the large conference table in the main living area. It was a massive, ambitious project, the complete revitalization of a decaying industrial waterfront district. The Blackwood Waterfront Initiative. My team is stalled, he said, all looking at the plans with a hint of frustration. They see buildings. They don't see a community. She walked over, her curiosity piqued. She studied the plans, her eyes tracing the proposed layouts, the traffic flows, the public spaces. After a long silence, she picked up a red marker. May I? She asked. He nodded. She began to draw directly on the blueprints. Her hand moved with a fluid confidence. She rerouted a proposed roadway, transforming it into a pedestrian-only thoroughfare lined with small shops. She broke up a monolithic block of proposed condos, creating a series of smaller, more intimate courtyards. She added a floating park, a series of interconnected barges with gardens and cafes. You're not creating enough porousness, she explained, her voice alive with passion. A city breathes through its public spaces. You've given them lungs, but no way to inhale. He watched her, mesmerized. He was not watching a fragile woman he had rescued. He was watching a master at work. He was watching genius unfold in real time. The corporate metaphors he lived by seemed inadequate. This wasn't a hostile takeover or a leveraged buyout. This was art. This was creation. You're right, he said, his voice quiet with revelation. Their relationship was built in these moments. It was a slow burn, fueled not by romantic passion, but by a profound and growing mutual respect. He gave her safety and the resources to fight her battles. She, in turn, gave him a new way to see the world he was trying to build. She was not a project to be managed or an asset to be acquired. She was becoming his partner. Marcus Vance, meanwhile, was living in a rapidly shrinking world of delusion. His credit cards were being declined. His lines of credit were being called in by banks he had worked with for years. His phone calls to investors went unreturned. He was hemorrhaging money and prestige, but his arrogance was a fortress that admitted no bad news. He sat in his lawyer's office, a space that now felt cheap and cramped. She's bluffing, Marcus insisted, pacing the worn carpet. She has nothing. Kalen Blackwood? He's just playing with her. He'll get bored. Rich men always do. Give her 3 days, maybe a week. She'll be begging to come back. She can't survive without me. His lawyer, a man named Slimy enough to be named Finch, looked nervous. Marcus, my sources say Blackwood's legal team is formidable. They're not just defending. They're preparing an offensive. Offensive? With what? Marcus scoffed. Her little drawings? I have a signed contract, an NDA. She signed over all intellectual property to the company. It's airtight. He slammed his hand on the desk. We need to hit back. Hard. Sue her. Sue her for intellectual property theft, for violating the NDA, for defamation. Bury her in paperwork. Make her life a living hell until she crawls back and apologizes. Finch paled. Marcus, that's incredibly risky. That opens you up to discovery. They'll get to see all our internal documents. Let them, Marcus roared. There's nothing to find. The Vance Tower is my design. My name is on the blueprints. My name is on the award. He pointed a trembling finger at Finch. File the lawsuit. Now. The lawsuit was filed. It was a clumsy, brutish document, full of blustering accusations and empty threats. It landed on the polished desk of Kaylin Blackwood's lead attorney, a woman who had once made a South American dictator weep on the witness stand. She read it, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. He did it, she said into the phone to Kaylin. He walked right into the trap. Good, Kaylin replied. Schedule the deposition, but also send an invitation. The invitation arrived at Marcus's crumbling office a week later. It was printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock, the ink a deep obsidian black. It was an invitation to the Blackwood Holdings annual shareholder meeting. The location was printed in elegant script at the bottom. The Grand Atrium, Vance Tower. Below that, a note. A special announcement will be made concerning the future of the Blackwood Waterfront Initiative and the Vance Tower project. It's a trap, Finch warned, wringing his hands. He's going to humiliate you. No, Marcus said, his eyes gleaming with a feverish, desperate light. It's an olive branch. He's cornered me, shown me his power. Now he's inviting me back into the fold. He needs me. He knows I'm the only one who can really run this project. He's going to announce a partnership. He straightened his tie. This is it. This is where I get my life back. He was completely blind. He was a man reading a happy ending in his own obituary. His arrogance had become a terminal illness. He saw the invitation not as a summons to his own execution, but as a ticket to his resurrection. The grand atrium of the Vance Tower was Alara's masterpiece. It was a soaring, cathedral-like space, 4 stories high, with a glass ceiling that filtered the afternoon light into soft, ethereal beams. A living wall, thick with ferns and mosses, covered one entire side, and a minimalist waterfall whispered into a black granite pool. It was a space designed to inspire awe, to make human beings feel both small and significant at the same time. Today, it was filled with the most powerful people in the city: investors, board members, city officials, and the press. Alara stood near the podium just to the side of Kaylin Blackwood. She wore a dress the color of steel, its lines clean and severe. She was not hiding in the shadows anymore. She was a quiet, solid presence at the center of the storm. She felt a strange calm. The fear was gone, or replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Today, the record would be corrected. Kaylin leaned over slightly. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. "I have been ready for 10 years," she replied. Just then, a commotion near the entrance drew a few glances. Marcus had arrived. He was wearing an expensive suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, but his eyes burned with a manic confidence. He strode into the atrium as if he owned it, which, in his mind, he still did. He saw Alara standing next to Kaylin, and his face twisted into a snarl. This was not how he had pictured his triumphant return. She was supposed to be gone, erased. Instead, she was standing at the right hand of the king. His desperate narrative shattered. This was not an olive branch. It was a declaration of war. He lost what little composure he had left. He stormed towards them, his steps echoing in the suddenly quiet hall. "What is she doing here?" he bellowed, pointing at Alara. The press, smelling blood, swarmed forward, cameras flashing. Kaylin did not move. He simply watched Marcus approach, his expression one of bored disappointment. "This is my building," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. He got right in Kaylin's face. "My design! And that," he jabbed a finger at Alara, "is my wife. She has an obligation to me. She owes me." He turned to Alara, his eyes wild. "You think you can just take everything from me? After I made you, you are nothing." Alara met his gaze. She did not flinch. She did not speak. Her silence was more powerful than his screams. It was the silence of a mountain observing a thunderstorm. It would pass. She would remain. Marcus grabbed for her arm again, a pathetic echo of his aggression at the gala. Before his fingers could touch her, Kaylin's hand shot out and caught his wrist. Kaylin's grip was like steel. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice dangerously soft. He held Marcus's wrist for a moment longer, letting the humiliation sink in, then released it with a look of disgust, as if he had touched something unclean. He straightened his cuff and turned to the podium, leaving Marcus standing there, sputtering and impotent. "Good afternoon," Kaylin said into the microphone. His voice was calm, resonant, and instantly commanded the attention of the entire room. The cameras turned from Marcus to him. "Thank you for coming. We have a few important announcements." He looked out at the sea of faces. "As some of you may know, Blackwood Holdings has a significant interest in the future of this city's development. We invest in projects and in people we believe in. We also believe in accountability." A giant screen behind him flickered to life. It showed the logo for Vance Development. "Effective last Tuesday," Kaylin announced, Blackwood Holdings completed a full acquisition of the parent company of Vance Development, including all its assets, liabilities, and ongoing projects. A wave of murmurs went through the crowd. Marcus stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open. "This was not a hostile takeover," Kaylin continued, his voice cold and precise. "It was a necessary corporate restructuring in the face of gross financial mismanagement, pending litigation, and significant fraudulent activity." He gestured to the screen. A new slide appeared. It was a complex flowchart showing a web of shell corporations and holding companies. At the top was Marcus Vance. At the bottom, now owning everything, was the Blackwood Holdings logo. "Every asset you thought you owned, Marcus," Kaylin said, addressing him directly for the first time. "Every bank account, every share of stock, now belongs to me. The home you lived in, the car you drive, the company that bears your name. It's all mine." Marcus's face had gone from red to a ghastly, waxy white. He began to tremble. "But the reason for this acquisition was not financial," Kaylin went on, his voice dropping slightly, drawing the room in. "It was to correct a record. For the last decade, the architectural world has been celebrating the work of a man who is, at best, a moderately competent project manager. The real genius, the true architect behind the projects that built his reputation, has remained in the shadows." The screen changed again. This time, it showed a split view. On one side was the final polished blueprint for the Vance Tower, with Marcus's name in the title block. On the other side was a grainy, scanned image of a sketch on a napkin. It was unmistakably the first, raw concept for the tower. The date stamp on the digital scan was 3 years before the project was officially commissioned. The screen zoomed in on the metadata. Creator, E. Vance. Another slide. A video file. It was a screen recording, sped up, showing a CAD file being developed, a building taking shape, lines and curves and structures blooming on the screen with breathtaking speed and artistry. The user profile in the corner read Alara V, then the video showed the file being saved, closed, then reopened by a different user, Marcus V. The only action this new user took was to select the title block, delete Alara V, and type Marcus Vance. "We have server logs," Kaylin said, his voice a cold, final judgment. "We have hundreds of original files. We have metadata. We have sworn affidavits from former employees. We have a decade's worth of irrefutable proof that every significant design to come out of Vance Development was created by one person, a person whose name was systematically erased from her own work." Marcus made a choking sound. It was the sound of a man drowning on dry land. His entire world, the entire lie his life was built on, was being dismantled piece by piece in front of everyone. He filed a lawsuit against her for stealing his intellectual property, Kalen said, a note of incredulous contempt in his voice. It was a fatal miscalculation. The final slide appeared. It was a beautiful professional headshot of Alara. The architect of the Vance Tower, Kalen declared, is Alara Vance. Marcus collapsed. It was not a dramatic fall. His legs simply gave out. He dropped to his knees on the polished granite floor of the atrium she had designed. A terrible animal sound tore from his throat, a sob of absolute world-ending despair. He was broken, utterly and publicly ruined. Security moved in, the same two men from the gala. They lifted the sobbing, incoherent man to his feet and escorted him out. No one watched him go. All eyes were on Alara. Kalen turned from the podium and held out a hand to her. The gesture was both an invitation and a statement. He was bringing her out of the shadows and into the light. She took his hand. It was warm and steady. He led her to the podium and stepped aside, giving her the stage. "I would like to introduce you all," Kalen said, his voice filled with a quiet pride that was more powerful than any applause. "To Alara Vance, the architect of this magnificent building and the new head of the Blackwood Urban Design Division. She will be personally overseeing the waterfront initiative." For a moment there was silence. The room was processing the raw, brutal justice they had just witnessed. Then a single person began to clap, then another and another, until the entire atrium was filled with a thunderous, rolling wave of applause. It was not polite applause. It was genuine, fervent, and overwhelming. It was for her. Alara stood at the podium, her hand still in Kalen's, and let the sound wash over her. It was the sound of recognition, the sound of vindication. A small, real smile touched her lips, and for the first time in a very long time, it reached her eyes. Later, after the press had been managed and the shareholders placated, they stood alone on the observation deck of the tower. The city spread out before them, a tapestry of infinite light. The wind was cool on her face. She took a deep, slow breath, an exhale that felt like it carried 10 years of weight with it. "It's over," she said, the words a quiet realization. "It's beginning," he corrected her gently. She looked at him. In the cool moonlight, his severe features were softened. He was not just a protector, not just a sovereign. He was the man who had seen her when she was invisible. He had recognized her worth not to possess it, but to liberate it. Theirs was a strange love story, written in blueprints and legal documents, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than fleeting passion. It felt more real and more durable than anything she had ever known. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He did not flinch or stiffen. He simply wrapped an arm around her, a gesture of quiet, solid comfort. They stood there for a long time, two silent figures against the glittering skyline, a partnership forged in the crucible of one man's ruin and a woman's reclamation. The end of her story with Marcus was not the end of her story. It was the preface. The real work was about to begin. Weeks later, the penthouse was no longer a sanctuary. It was a studio, a headquarters, a home. The vast living area was dominated by a massive drafting table littered with sketches, blueprints, and models for the waterfront project. It was a beautiful, creative chaos. Alara stood over the table, a pencil tucked behind her ear, her brow furrowed in concentration. Kalen stood beside her, looking over her shoulder. The dynamic was easy, familiar. They were partners in every sense of the word. "The traffic flow analysis came back," he said, pointing to a section of the plan. "They're projecting a bottleneck here at the entrance to the ferry terminal." She studied the schematics, her mind already working, seeing the space in 3 dimensions, seeing the flow of people, the movement of light. "They're thinking of it as a terminal," she murmured. "A place people leave from, but it should be a destination." "A place people arrive at." She picked up a pencil, the graphite tip hovering over the paper. She looked at him, a spark of excitement in her eyes, the pure, unadulterated joy of a creator about to solve a puzzle. "I have an idea," she said. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I'm listening." She began to draw. The lines were bold, confident, and full of vision. They were not building a project. They were building a future, together. And this time, her name would be on every page.